Most people played with Lego as a kid, and these 8 blocks are kind of one of the foundations of what you can build with. And you can take them and you can use your imagination and build almost anything. And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed playing with Lego as a kid. The most common Lego pieces are all of these little parts, as you can see here. Now, these are common parts, of course, and I'm sure you've seen some unique Lego pieces. Number 9 in particular is great to step on as an adult. But all of these little Lego pieces come together and you can build pretty much anything you'd like. And this is kind of what JavaScript is trying to do for you. It's giving you a whole bunch of tools that allow you to manipulate the design of a web page. So you can manipulate the actual content using modifying the HTML. You can modify the CSS, and you can even interact with the page and add new functionality, like creating a calculator. But if you were to try to build something very complex with these pieces, even though they're the most common pieces, it would take you a very long time. So what can you do with that? Well, what we typically do is buy a kit. And if you need a fire station, well, here it is, right? These of course have more than just those common parts, uh, but you can build up what you want using this kit just by following the directions, and you end up with effectively a fire station. And this city line has many different items within it. You can build it in literally an entire city, and each individual kit comes with one thing, and it's still built from those blocks that build the um, from what you saw originally, those 8 blocks and all those common pieces, as well as many more, of course. But it's the job of the Lego company to put the kit together and give it to you, and you get joy in actually building it. Of course, you can manipulate and do other things with it as well, but it comes as a kit for you to be able to build, and then you get, a single piece of the city here. So what jQuery is effectively, it's a library that does that for you. You get your Lego city. So if you need a house, if you need a hotel, you need a fire station, you literally just say, I want a fire station. You don't have to worry about figuring out what pieces to put together to be able to do that. It's literally saying, just give me what I need rather than having me to find in all of these pieces what I'm trying to look for by architecting a solution. So jQuery really is a time saver. It really simplifies JavaScript programming. It is really easy to learn, and I would argue if you don't like JavaScript, you might really like jQuery. Now, it has some uniqueness to it. It's weird in the way it's written. This doesn't look like anything you've seen before in JavaScript. So you have this $sign and then a bracket, which is the entry point to jQuery. Yeah, it's kind of weird. That's the whole language right there. Literally, you just say this and you're jumping in. So that's basically saying, hey, jQuery, I need in my current document, I need to build a fire station. And you can do some pretty cool stuff. So just with these few lines of code, this actually will make anything disappear that you click on. So it's a pretty cool way of being able to interface with your web page. And I'd really encourage you to use jQuery in this current assignment. Now recognize jQuery is as complex as Lego City is. You can find pretty much anything out there inside of jQuery, and there's even extensions to jQuery, like there's a jQuery UI interface, which many websites actually use, including Esri's. So if you visit something like Survey123, all of these standard interfaces, like this button and this toolbar, these are all jQuery. So you can actually grab that. Um, Now, I haven't checked this Survey123 website to verify that actually that is jQuery, but you can actually um, build this type of stuff very easily. You can just say, give me a button, make it blue. You don't have to worry about actually trying to build a whole bunch of stuff using those very basic parts that are JavaScript. You still need to understand how to glue things together. If you wanted to take um, two complex big solutions and combine them, you might need to use one of these 8 by 1 pieces. That's something you might need. So jQuery has a couple of different things in it. So let's just jump into this code here for a moment and take a look at what is different than a normal HTML page. So we start off with a standard HTML page, and in this case, the script is embedded. And you'll notice there's this special script. It says script, and then it says source, and then there's a URL. And this is what's actually providing the jQuery code. This is actually what provides the overarching solution that allows me to just basically saying, hey, jQuery, do something for me. So you have to include this. Otherwise, it doesn't know how to work. Otherwise, it's just straight JavaScript, which you've already been doing. Now, when you include this library, you have a whole bunch of options to do different things. But you can't call the function, the $ function here, to enter jQuery before you actually add the library. So the library typically is added at the very top of your web page. It doesn't always need to be though. You notice this is in the head environment. Scripts do not always need to be in the head. They can be anywhere. Unlike CSS or a lot of other HTML-based items, the head is a great way to load stuff before your page starts in the body. And this script, because it's fundamental, it's actually a foundation of this web page that jQuery will be used. It's important to put that up there. But this script could as easily been down here at the bottom. And the page will still run. As long as it's before the script section, which you can see it's right before, it'll work. Now, I could actually put this below here, but will this work now? See how it doesn't work anymore? Why is that? Because this script goes through and looks at every single thing that's on the web page and then puts this function to it. It basically says, hey, you need to hide when you are clicked. But it doesn't exist yet. So there is an order of operations, and that's really important in anything that has to do with JavaScript, that you understand that order of operations. So if I move let's actually move this just above 1, and we'll show you. So it's above the 1, and then the 2 are below it, although I messed up something. Because there's, oh, I see the problem. The script is here. Okay, and we'll put this down here. So there's one item above, which means it'll exist when this JavaScript jQuery function runs, and then there's 2 below. So when I run this, if I click on the bottom one, you can see it hides, and well, it's hiding all of them. Okay, I didn't do something right, apparently. It knows about all of them. Oh, it's because the script ran this time. Oh, well, apparently I need to review my coding. Well, it is 6 a.m. So I guess I could be excused for making a coding mistake right now. But let's trace it anyway. Let's just make sure I understand what happened. Okay, so this 1p is above. And then we're doing this. Then we're grabbing the document. Oh, you know what I did wrong? Okay, so just tracing it helps me. So there's this document ready thing. So what I was saying is true, that the document has to be in a proper order, but jQuery, like my big Lego blocks, which give me a fire station, and it just gives me a fire station, it's done that for me. This document ready is a way for this program to basically wait until the entire web page has loaded before it runs. That's why it didn't matter where I placed this. So this says, hey, pause, finish loading the entire web page. Once you've loaded all the web page, then do this. And that's why it works still. The reason it didn't work before is because I missed that script. Okay, so hopefully that little bit of debugging helped you understand what was going on. If not, um, really simply put, let's jump into what's going on with that ready. So goodbye, Lego. Thank you, Lego. Okay, so jQuery, we already need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which we do. And if you don't, let's pretend you do. So what is jQuery? It's a JavaScript library, and there's many JavaScript libraries out there. For example, when we start learning about Esri's web maps, there's actually JavaScript libraries for that that you can include. And jQuery has these fundamental things that allow you to change the DOM, the document object model, the CSS. You can actually do things based on events. So no, not your birthday. jQuery is not going to knock on your door and say happy birthday. If you click on a button, for example, you might have an on-click event, which then triggers some action. So that's called event driven. So HTML events. You can also do cool effects and animations. Ajax, yeah, it is a town in Southern Ontario, but in this case, it's a way for programs to go make requests after the page is already loaded. So the program on your browser actually kind of acts like its own little program. And then there's utilities to do common things. There's tons of plugins for jQuery out there. So the very first thing you need to understand is jQuery is also written about cross-browser issues to solve these. Like you don't have to actually solve all these stupid little problems because every single browser seems to want to do their own thing. And it's really frustrating when you're trying to make something work and it works great and then you go try it in Firefox because you were using Chrome and it doesn't work. And you learn that, yeah, you have to do something different to make that JavaScript work because they did things slightly differently than the way Google did it. And that's just the reality of the web. Well, jQuery handles that for you. That's another major advantage of it. Okay, so let's get started. So the very first thing you need to do is download the jQuery library. But let's pause right there. This jQuery library, let me just grab it for a second here. And we're going to paste this into a browser. And you'll see it literally looks like the matrix just exploded on your computer. And it's a fairly large file. And there's this min portion. So let's get rid of that min. Now I can actually see what the code looks like. And you can see how many lines is this? Well, a lot, right? Let's go view page source and let's find out how many lines it is. It's, 10,000 plus. That's a lot of lines of code. Now, if you were to put this on every single website, that means every time your browser goes and hits a website that needs the jQuery libraries, it has to download it again because it's in a different website. What if we put a single copy of the jQuery library somewhere that anybody could get at? So you don't actually have to download it every time. You can just say, hey, okay, I need the jQuery library. I'll just go to the jQuery website and I'll grab it. And the next website, it says, oh, you already have the jQuery library. Great. Well, we're just going to use it again on this website. So it makes things more efficient. It makes things faster. Well, you just learned what a CDN is. So you can download it and put it into your own computer like this, which is fine if for some circumstances. It is an available option, but it is not the most efficient. The better option is a CDN, and it's a content delivery network. So CDN, no, it is Canadian as well. Yeah, I know. But no, it's a content delivery network in this context. And each major provider out there, I guess, actually hosts the jQuery library for you to grab it. And they have this minified version, and that just means they've removed any extra character to make it as efficient as possible. It still will run as code, but it's terrible to look at. And then if you get rid of the min portion, of course, then it's readable. So you can read through this. But this basically removes everything that is not essential except for this little comment at the top. Okay, so that's a Google CDN. Now there's lots of different CDNs out there. There's Google, there's Microsoft's. Um, so, so Microsoft's CDN is available as well, and you can grab it. So there are multiple places to grab it from. Microsoft's and Google's are the most common ways to grab it, though. Okay, so let's get into a little more about the syntax. Okay, so jQuery always uses this selecting in syntax. And basically it is you do this $ bracket, and then you give it a selector of some sort. So you give it something you want to actually grab. Hey, go grab, and you saw the original example, it was grabbing the document. Then do this. So it's that simple. You can actually manipulate stuff really easily. So this hide. This is this. Whatever is calling it is this. It's like saying me. Or this will hide all the P elements. This will hide all with a class of test. This will hide the ID test. So you can see you have to understand the CSS side of things because it's using the same selector that CSS uses effectively in this field. Now these are straight strings because you're literally saying, hey, grab this. Now there is that one part that kind of confused me when I got started, and that's that document ready event. And you'll notice that all jQuery methods in the examples for W3 schools anyway, are inside this document ready event. So this is to prevent any code from running before the document is finished loading. Because if you don't have the jQuery library downloaded yet, so let me just grab this for example. So if you don't have this downloaded yet, it won't run. And if you try to run your own code, it won't work because there's an order of operations problem. So something that you need to actually solve. So it's a pretty cool solution to the problem of the chicken and egg, which came first, right? Well, this basically forces it to wait. So the jQuery method will go in here, whatever you're going to do. So you'll pretty much always use this to start. Now this can be simplified to this. It doesn't matter which syntax you use. This one I think makes more sense. You're actually seeing a little bit more code, and one of the things jQuery tries to do is minify or make as small as possible your code. So it is a way to be able to make things more efficient. So yeah, pretty cool. Now jQuery selectors, as you've already learned about selectors with CSS, it's actually based on that. Now it does have its own custom selectors as well, so it's not an exact copy. But if you understand CSS selectors and how they work, then you already understand how to use jQuery selectors. So you can, it's not exactly the same. Like for example, if you're going to select all P's, this is the way you do it. So let's give this one a try. So these are all paragraphs. So let's see, there's an H2 and then paragraphs. And if I click this, it hides all the paragraphs. So when that button is clicked, so you see you have your document ready, then you have your button. When it clicks, so basically you're saying, hey button, when the button is clicked, that's your method, do this stuff. And then it hides it. So a pretty cool way of working. ID selectors are pretty similar to, again, CSS. You just do the pound or the hashtag and then test if you wanted to select anything that was test. And that works pretty much the exact same way. So you can see here, we're going to select anything that has the test. So you can see only one of them has it. And that's the one that disappears. And it doesn't matter if it's a paragraph or not now. I can do ID equals test up here. And of course, when I run that one, now it's going to hide the heading and the paragraph. Whoops. Nope. Guess why it didn't do that? Did you catch that? Let's run that again. So I have an ID in test and an ID down here that's a test in this paragraph. It should remove both of these, right? So who's screaming at me why this didn't work? Do you see the problem? So let's take a look at that. So do you see it? So what type of function is this? What is it calling? This test. What type of selector is it? It's an ID. Now, IDs only can be used once on a web page, and it's being used twice here. So what you end up with is only the first item, it stops working after you see that first item. That's why it gets rid of that first one, but the second one doesn't. So whichever ID it sees first, it does, and then it stops working, because an ID is only meant to identify one item on a page. So that's why it didn't work. So that's the ID. Now the class selector is the one you'd want to do to be able to hide more than one item. So a class can be reused many different places. So now we can have actually this class on the H2 as well as on the P. So when I run that, you can see it hides multiple items. So anything with the class test will work. So remember, an ID can only be used once on a web page, and a class can be used multiple times. I can even hide the button. So the button will even disappear, right? Nothing like the disappearing web page to confuse your friends. Okay, so those are selectors, and there's lots of different types of selectors in here. I'm not going to go through them all. Once you understand the basics, you can understand them. So this is all elements. This literally means the current HTML element, which might be a little different than what you think. And this is that one that you saw originally. So whatever you click, it would actually go away. So this, you can see, this hides. So when I have that button, it'll hide that item because it's that item that's getting referenced as the button. So whatever you have targeted here. So if you make this all P's, for example, then it, well, it should have hid all the P's. PP, yeah, that's correct. Let's try rerunning the page because everything looks right. Oh, there you go. I just must have not hit the run button. Okay, so there you go. So now it's hitting all P's, and then we can do that with H2. See? So whatever you're selecting here, it's doing it. So this means whatever item it's actually referencing. And if you do star, now whenever you click anything, it hides everything, right? Because star is the all selector. So all of these are different selectors, and you can see a lot of them mirror the CSS syntax. So there is a little bit of a difference between them, but for the most part, they're the same. Now, events, again, not your birthday, but events, there's lots of them, and the most common ones, click, double click, mouse enter, mouse leave, so when you hover over something. There's keyboard events, key pressing. There's form events, so when you click submit on a form. There's document loading, so once the document is loaded, if you resize your window, if you scroll, if you unload, meaning it goes away. So there's lots of different ways to do it. Now, the biggest thing before you even move any further through these is, okay, well, how do you know about all this stuff? Well, just like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, there's a reference here at the bottom. And the reference is the full library. Now, I wouldn't recommend going through and reading the reference. What I would recommend you do if you're trying to use jQuery is look for examples. Look for something that kind of does what you want already and look at its code take its code if it's permitted, put a reference in your documentation, so as a comment before that code block saying, yeah, I grabbed this code and it's modified from this, and then just tweak it to do what you want. Don't start building from scratch. That's pretty rare in the web space that people build things from scratch. Usually they're manipulating someone else's content to do what they want. So that's the way I'd recommend moving forward with it. But the reference here is pretty wide. There's a whole bunch of jQuery examples as well, which gives you examples on how to do different things. It might give you some ideas what to do in your page. And they get more and more complicated as you go. There's some pretty cool interface options as well. So jQuery itself has its own website, jQuery.com, and there's a whole bunch of documentation here. There's different examples. There's actually jQuery UI as well. So this gives you some really cool interface options. So an example is you can actually drag stuff around. So you can actually have like a Windows environment. And this, believe it or not, isn't much code. That's the entire web page right there. Now, the UI extension to jQuery does require you to add a second reference. So, and you have to have some CSS added too. This is a little bit more complicated. So you can see here in their script, they have the jQuery library loaded first. And the second thing they do is add the jQuery UI extension. So that has to happen after. And then finally, because they're using a UI interface, it does need to have some CSS. So it does have a payload of a generic jQuery UI CSS. So you have to include that. And then it has the page-specific styles. So there's lots of different options out there. So go ahead and explore and see what you can find. There's really cool stuff to be able to work with jQuery. Now, I do recommend going through and playing with jQuery a little bit. So play with some effects, play with some HTML, just to understand what it does. Being able to move through or find objects. So you have the DOM tree, which kind of looks like this. And this is probably the hardest part about making jQuery work, or actually even JavaScript work, because you still need to navigate through this. There's find element by ID, of course, which allows you to grab stuff directly, but you need to understand this hierarchy. And this hierarchy is actually reflected inside of Notepad++. So in this Notepad++ document, you can see there's these plus and minuses, which is actually the hierarchy of the web page. That's actually what you're looking at right here. So it's pretty simple to explore. Just open up the Notepad++ and you can see the pluses and minuses. You can also start navigating relatively. So you can actually find the parent of something. So this object in the tree, it would basically go backwards one in the tree to find whatever owns it. There's descendants, so meaning jumping forward on the tree. There's things that are equal to it. And you can also do filtering. So you can actually find the first or last. So you can see going back and forth between the objects and the DOM. So the document object model, it's pretty simple. AJAX, the concept of AJAX is exchanging data from the server. And you can actually see that right here. So watch this, geocommunity.net, open house. So if you go into this page, you can see how it's loading, and then it actually pops this open. That's using AJAX to be able to do that. It actually loads this content after. So if I stopped the JavaScript from running, this page would end up with being just blank. It would be stuck. So you can see that load action right there. So that's what Ajax doing. So you can actually go grab external content. So in this context, it's actually loading text from a document and it's inserting it into div1. So this is literally a text file and it's actually inserting it into here. So pretty cool. Now, don't get too hung up on Ajax though. There's a whole bunch of restrictions on it, and websites have to have some special parameters set on them to be able to cross domains. Otherwise, you could actually have one computer, one website trying to access files on your own computer, and it doesn't allow that. So there is security implications with Ajax, and it's beyond the scope of this course. But just understanding that it's asynchronous JavaScript and XML, that's all it basically means. That's what Ajax stands for. There's a whole bunch of other options in here. And as I said, go ahead and give some of these a try and just to have a basic understanding of jQuery. Now, not everybody wants to learn how to program, of course. Uh, that's okay. But understanding the basics really will help you out. And if it is something you want to learn more about and work with jQuery, I encourage you to dive in and take a look at some of the other libraries.